This episode of the Fat or Future podcast is sponsored by, well, me and my diet crash course exclusively from Himalaya Podcast Networks. What is my diet crash course? Well, have you ever been curious about 20 of the top diets in the world? You wanted the cliff notes to all of them because you just don't want to read all the books? I have you covered with my diet crash course. 20 of the top diets in the world and maybe some you haven't heard of. Should you try them? What are they about? What does the research say? What does the research maybe not say? Himalaya.com/diet and listen for free, and use code DIET to listen for 2 weeks of the Himalaya Diet Crash Course exclusively on the Himalaya podcast player. Himalaya.com/diet, and I will see you there. Hey, what's up? It's Joey Thurman on this episode of the Fad or Future podcast. I have a doctor who actually lifts weights. What? Yes, Dr. Spencer Nadolsky, the memeologist, lipid specialist, metabolism expert. He's on this episode. We talk about metabolic rate, what increases your metabolism, what lowers it, what happens when you lose weight, what happens when you gain muscle tissue, this and so much more. And here's my conversation with Dr. Spencer Nadolsky. All right, what's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Fat or Future podcast. Today, I have Dr. Spencer Nadolsky. Man, you were in a tank top because you're actually a doctor who lifts.
Yeah, that's right. I'm right after this. I'm working out, and I'm going on another podcast.
That's pretty good. Most doctors, I don't even know if they know what a weight is, or they're like, do some cardio. So it's really interesting when I found you. I don't know if I found you on Instagram or Twitter. It might have been Twitter. You're highly active on there. What are all your handles?
Basically, it's usually, I don't know if it's at Dr. Nadolsky there. I try to get at Dr. Spencer, but someone always has it. But at Dr. Nadolsky, DrNadolsky. Okay.
Yeah, I found you on there, and that was your tagline, a doctor who actually lifts. I was like, all right, let me check this guy. Check this guy out.
Lifting is medicine. That's right.
I completely agree with you, man. So you're a board-certified family and obesity physician. I've never actually heard of an obesity physician. Is that something you specialized in?
Yeah, it's somewhat new. They are trying to get it much bigger because obviously most doctors should know about evidence-based, science-based weight loss as opposed to whatever HCG diet or whatever some of these doctors are promoting, or B12 shots. I also just got another board in lipidology, which is the study of like cholesterol and stuff. So kind of like a cardiometabolic specialist.
Nice.
I try to promote lifestyle, but like I'm very I have a lot of knowledge in pharmacology as well, if needed. So try to combine it all.
Yeah, no, you got a lot, and then you were a nationally ranked wrestler as well.
Yeah, dude, UNC, Chapel Hill, Tar Heels.
That's pretty good. I mean, the wrestlers, I played hockey through college. These teeth are real, but nice. The wrestlers always are just a different breed of animal. Absolutely unreal.
We're a different type of folk there.
Okay, so are hockey players too. Have you ever been in a hockey locker room? The smell, like if you got to handle that, hockey equipment just reeks, dude.
I can imagine.
You can't really wash a lot you like, my wife's like, what the hell? She's like, can you put it somewhere else? Like, no, I can't leave expensive equipment out in the sun. It's just going to bake. You don't want to buy new equipment because you break it in. So, we're much stinkier than wrestlers. It's interesting because you wanted to help people online, which is really, now with kind of everything that's happening in the world, but you've been doing this for years now where you're mainly helping people online.
Yeah, I thought the clinic was archaic. For a lot of this stuff, you just don't need to see the doctor in person. Kind of the old school way of thinking, and kind of older patients will be like, no, I need to see my doctor in person. They're used to it. But kind of this newer generation, you realize like, look, how do you need to listen to their heart every single time? Do you need to listen to their lungs? Like whenever I go in and I'm just there for a question because I couldn't get them online. Right. They're like listening to my heart and lungs. I'm like, that's not what I'm here for. You're not going to hear anything. I know you're going through the motions, but whatever. It's like, I'm a physician. I know what you're doing. Patients, they like that that you're touching them and kind of like, oh, I'm kind of healing you. But honestly, it's not needed unless you have a physical ailment.
Yeah.
So like, yeah, I'm just getting my thyroid checked, to make sure every 6 months or whatever you're going to make sure your levels are fine. Do you really need to go in? Maybe if you're looking for signs of like hyperthyroidism, like you can get a little tremors and then you can check their deep tendon reflexes and things. But like, honestly, you can do most things via video.
Yeah.
And actually we're getting gizmos that can listen to your heart and lungs like almost better than if you were there in the clinic because of how technology is, and you can hear it through the computer and you can do all sorts of things like, oh wow, that can actually look like that through the computer. It's interesting. We'll get there someday. We're not there just yet, but that's the future, especially with like, think about this pandemic, COVID. It's like, you don't want people going into the clinic. Yes, you should be able to assess people. Like if somebody's going down in tubes, you got to assess them and look at them physically. But like, we should be able to have guidelines that go like, look, hey, if you have these symptoms and you're not doing well, come in. And the thing is, like, if you're not doing well with COVID, you're probably going to want to go to the emergency room anyway. So we should probably find a way to triage patients correctly, because you don't want to bring those people into the clinic. So,
yeah, I mean, there's a lot of, it's obviously right in our face now because what's going on, but my son's 2.5 years old and we had to take him in all the time for all these different things. And every time, like, you're right, they go through the motions, they put him on the scale, they do that. Like, I know the kid's huge, like he's a giant. Like, do we really need to weigh him? He gets pissed off when they've got to take off all of his clothes. Anyways, can't you take off like a pound for the clothes? We really have to every single time. You're right. It's just kind of the same thing. So I think now as we're pushing forward with doing telemedicine, it's really interesting. And that's why, one of the reasons that I wanted to talk to you. You're also the chief physician, Renaissance Periodization. Tell me a little bit about that.
RP. Renaissance Periodization company founded by Nick Shaw and Mike Israetel, a couple smart guys from U of M, which I won't hold that against them. I went to Michigan State originally, ended up transferring to UNC, but I'll always be a Spartan. But a couple smart guys, they saw that like, hey, if we use science of exercise and nutrition instead of kind of this BS stuff that you see all these marketers pushing online, and just kind of put our heads down and do it this way, it's the best way and we'll get results. And that's what they did. And then they made these like scientific templates, and now they have an app and they have coaching. And so my methods in the clinic and online were very similar. So they said, why don't you just join us? We're very similar. We can help each other. So that's what I did. And now I kind of oversee some of their coaching and some of their app and template development, and kind of overall try to push this idea of using science instead of BS for nutrition and exercise, which ultimately gets people healthier and leaner and whatever.
Yeah. I had a conversation with Nick a couple of years ago, and he sent me a program. And I was looking at this, like this, I mean, and I'm a fitness nutrition specialist and obviously do the fitness and personal training, everything for a living. And I was like, wow, this actually makes a ton of sense, because the program that he sent me was based off of the activity level and what was happening during that specific day. Because everybody's like, oh, what's my BMR? Like, well, what's your total daily energy expenditure? How much are you lifting? And what's your volume? And your nutrition should change based off of that. And then when I looked at it, and then there was like a picture of like a deck of cards and like a piece of meat. I'm like, okay, that's tangible. Yeah. People can see that. Like, they don't need to sit there. When I was doing fitness competitions, yes, I was weighing everything, and that's completely different. Like, you're going on stage, you're going next to somebody, you're comparing striations for striations. Yeah, you need to get down to that specific. But for most individuals that want to look great or like take their shirt off, like, this made a ton of sense. So when I saw you that you were represented with RP as well, so that was really cool.
Yeah.
All right, man, let's get into it. What do you say?
Let's do it.
All right. So U.S. News and World Report just came out, and they said 40% of our nation is obese. And that's not overweight. So over half our country is overweight. Where in the hell should people start? What do you think the issue is?
Yeah, it's kind of a mismatch of our genetics and environment, on a population level. So when you look at individual level, I talk about this all the time, like, obesity is not a choice. People get really mad about that. It's not a choice either. We do have choices during the day, like You wake up in the morning. Should you go to get the Starbucks Frappuccino that has 800 calories?
Right.
Or should you drink a protein shake or, whatever? If you're going for a convenience, a protein shake, throw some coffee in there. Okay, so you increase your protein, you decrease all the sugar and yummy, easily overeaten calories. That's technically a choice.
Right.
For lunch, should you bring in your pre-prepped meal of chicken and broccoli and a little bit of rice, or do you want to go out with your coworkers to Chick-fil-A or whatever
Right.
the choice is at the moment?
Standard American beige colored food.
Yeah, dinner time. Sure, you can get home after a long day's work and go to the gym. You technically have that choice if you have the means. Of course, you have kids and spouses, whatever. But let's say you have the means, but you're tired, and you go home and your kids don't want to eat whatever lean sirloin steak with some sort of vegetable and a sweet potato, whatever. It doesn't have to necessarily be that. I'm just kind of picking out higher quality, satiating, lower calorie, high protein foods, high fibrous foods. Or do you want to just, it's so easy to grab a pizza because they'll eat that. It's convenient. You don't have to do much and you're tired. So what we have is this, like, our bodies, our genetics on a population scale, depending on your genetics, can kind of push you in a direction. And then you put ourselves in this environment where it's just easily overeaten food that's surrounding us and hitting us from not only hunger patterns, craving patterns, but also cultural society patterns from our friends and family and everything, all these stresses. So, like, what do we do? I don't know. I'm not a big fan of Big Brother coming in and basically going, you can't have sweets in that. We know that doesn't. Okay, so if you look at some of these taxes on sodas, when you look at the aggregate of data, there's some data in Mexico and some of these other places, it seems to work. In other places, it doesn't seem to have an effect, but maybe something like that. But I don't know. I don't really know other than having Big Brother step in and make legislation, we're going to have a population effect. I know on an individual standpoint, we can take someone and go, are you ready? Like, yes, I'm ready. They're willing to go for it. They believe they can do it, and we can help them one-on-one and do it. But population level wise, I'm not sure what to do other than basically replace, take everybody and put them on an island where you have to, you got to go pick your berries and pull your vegetables yourself, right, and go fishing and hunting. If you want meat, otherwise you're just going to basically be a vegetarian or vegan, Yeah. So it's tough because, like the thing is, you take the population, you put them back in a time where we don't have the surrounding yummy food. They're going to lose weight because it's impossible not to. But that's not going to happen. So I don't really have an answer.
Yeah, I think you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's laziness and convenience.
Yeah.
We just want everything. And even if Big Brother to step in, which they tried to in Chicago a couple of years ago, they tried to put a soda tax on. But then they also started taxing things that had sugar in it, like, maybe one of those like Suja drinks or something, which is predominantly vegetables, which you can go into it, like fruit juice and all that sort of stuff. But like a soda versus, if I'm going to have my kid drink a soda versus drink something that's, kale and spinach and has like an apple in it or something, I'd much rather have them have that. We're not going to talk about like the lack of fiber that's going to happen in that, but it's just really interesting. So people just got up in arms, but you tax cigarettes and, it makes sense because we know that this could cause cancer and premature death, but it just, where does Big Brother step in? But laziness and convenience, I think, is a really big issue. Now, you talk about when people want to lose weight. You're a big proponent of them lifting weights. And I saw a post that this was interesting, that you said when people lose fat, their metabolic rate actually drops. So if people were just reading headlines right now, they would be like, hey, I shouldn't lose weight or I shouldn't lift weights because my metabolism is going to go down.
Yeah, so fat's metabolically active, and I think people are like, oh, I'm worried about my metabolism going down. It's like, don't worry about your basal metabolism. You start increasing your movement, you make up for the drop in metabolism. No matter what, when you lose weight, your metabolism goes down. It doesn't matter if it's muscle, it doesn't matter if it's fat. Ideally, it would be fat, because your metabolism will be a little bit higher if you keep your muscle. But yeah, obviously we want to lift weights to keep our fat-free muscle or fat-free mass, and be able to continue to use that to where we can burn more calories during the day. And then also, I kind of have this hypothesis, and I know a few other people do as well, that when you have more muscle, you have more active storage depot or for glucose or sugar.
Mm-hmm.
And basically nutrient partitioning to where you're going to look and feel better and be metabolically healthier in the long run. And you're just going to like the way you look better. It's not as PC because people don't want to talk about that as much. But I mean, if you want to be real, people like the way they look when they have a little bit more muscle. Maybe not a ton, obviously. It's so hard to do.
Sure.
And that's another myth that people, women think they're going to get too bulky or whatever. But yeah, that's the goal. That's why I promote weightlifting heavily as opposed to just cardio. Ideally, you would do both, but
Right.
If you could.
Yeah, I mean, it's cyclical, right? We put on muscle tissue. We're able to uptake more glucose.
Yeah.
We're able to handle sugar better. If you do happen to have that pie on Thanksgiving or whatever the hell it is, and your body's able to use that, right, as opposed to be stored as fat.
Yeah,
right?
you store it as glycogen.
Right. So exactly, and then that overflows, and we're going to store fat. So that makes a ton of sense. And then when you do cardio, if you have more muscle tissue to type, 1 or 2, if you're going harder, you can actually get more force output out of that, which you can in turn burn more calories.
Yeah.
So it just keeps going down and down and down. You mentioned women and muscle tissue, and I'd like to touch on that. Actually, that's in my notes. So I've been training people for 14 years, from movie stars to C-suite executives, and most of the time when females come in, out of the probably a couple hundred females I've trained, there's a small percentage where I saw like we just are able to put on muscle like that. I think in the 14 years that there's been 2 females ever that were able to do that.
Yeah, it's possible, especially if they work really hard and eat a certain way. You see a lot of the CrossFit type women, lots and lots of volume, and then they have to eat a lot to keep up the performance. So then you see them
traps for days.
Personally, I think it looks great, but but you have to work pretty hard to do it.
Yeah. So why can't a female put on why do you think they're scared when they think of like looking at a weight that they pick that up even now? I mean, there's a lot more research out now, and there's a ton of bro science, as you touched on at the beginning, but why do you think they're still afraid to pick up weights?
Yeah, so women, what they tell me is they're afraid of looking bulky. That's what they tell me. They want to continue having that more feminine look. And I say, look, it's really hard. Yeah, sure. You don't have the hormonal milieu or whatever you want to say, the hormonal status of a guy and even for guys, it's hard to look. I've worked out my whole life to continue to look like this. It's hard work, but so you just, basically have to say, look, it's not going to happen. You have to eat a certain way. Sure, we can work to that if you really wanted to, but think of it more as just, and yeah, we don't like to use the word toning because it's kind of like it's a kind of a BS term, but if that's what helps them understand what it is, yeah, you're going to get a little bit more muscle, you're going to lose a little bit of fat, and you're going to look a little bit more toned, if that's the term you want to use. I don't really care. It's fine to use that term as long as people understand it for what it is.
Right.
And to get bulky, you're going to have to put on a appreciable amount of muscle mass, and that doesn't really happen too readily with women. So think of it as just toning up, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. I think a lot of women, if you say add muscle, then they immediately think bulk.
Yeah.
But if they're used to curling 10-pound pink dumbbells, and I give them a 20-pound pair of dumbbells, and they did 3 sets of that even to failure, they're not going to wake up tomorrow and have Terminator arms.
Yeah,
like muscle accrues slowly.
exactly.
So maybe you're a female that puts on muscle faster, but it's not going to be something where you wake up the next day. If you're like, okay, maybe I'm getting a little too big for my liking. Okay, then you can back off. Like
Yeah.
it's that easy.
A lot of women, they will be like, I gained 5 pounds of muscle in like a week when I started working out. It's like, no, that's not what happened. What happened, and I see this all the time, is that you do a hard resistance training workout and you get a little bit of cellular swelling, and so your legs look a little bit bigger. It's probably not much. Your arms maybe a little bit, but that's just an acute thing. It's not actual muscle. It's a little bit of cellular swelling. Maybe you ate some extra, sugary stuff and got some extra glycogen, or maybe it's just from acute tissue damage.
Right.
But it's not. You didn't gain muscle, and it's really takes some patience and just saying, nope, let's stick to this, believe in the plan, buy in, and then it's usually fine.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at a lot of bodybuilders, they stop doing legs about 2 weeks out prior to a show because their legs are so full.
Yeah.
And then some of them, depending on what happens, like if they maybe do some hamstrings or some calves, but I mean, their quads, they could just get really tight, and then they start cutting that down, and they'll start seeing those striations. So I will tell a lot of my female clients, like, when if you're doing like a heavy leg day, or then you're going to spin class and you're dancing on a bike, your quads are going to be a little overloaded and they're going to look a little bit bigger. They're not going to be, but give it a week or so and they're going to look much better. And get a spray tan or something, it'll show it off even more. I mean, why do you think people go on stage and they get those like dark spray tans? It looks better, and it shows that definition a lot more. So there's a tip: if you want to look better, get a tan.
Tanning will always help.
That's the thing. Like, I like myself when I'm tan, but I try to avoid these wrinkles, and I haven't got Botox yet, and I want to be able to move my face. So it's a tough call, Doc.
It is tough. I have a Southern California. I used to be very pale because I'd be winter half the year, it seemed like. But I can't avoid the sun here in San Diego. It's too hard. I like it. So
yeah, I don't feel bad for you for being in San Diego. I'm in Chicago.
Yeah, I'm from Michigan, so I know the deal. Chicago.
Yeah, that's California. Definitely not too bad. So you're a lipid specialist. What do you think is causing people to put on? I mean, we talked about a little bit with the obesity, but specifically, if we're looking at like adipose tissue, and if you're looking at a lipid profile, is there anything that you found that causes that? Increases it more, or that people handle things better?
Yeah, the issue is really what we call like central adiposity. If you put fat around your leg, like women, like, oh, I hate the fat around my thighs and my butt, but that fat may actually be somewhat healthful or healthy. And people are like, how's that healthy? It's like, well, our fat's active. It's hormonally active. In fact, people are like, that's the largest endocrine hormone organ we have in our body. And it's thought that, or seen, the fat around your legs may actually secrete more healthful hormones. If anything, it doesn't seem to be a negative issue. But the fat around your abdomen, specifically like the visceral fat, like you can't even pinch it.
Yep.
You kind of start increasing that waist circumference. That's the stuff that it's close to our liver. It gets into our organs, causes all sorts of dysfunction, and then these free fatty acids, the fat that's there, you lipolyze the fats that are there, and they're flowing in our blood and really causing all of the abnormalities in our lipid panel. The triglycerides get high, your HDL cholesterol gets low. You may or may not see changes in your LDL cholesterol, the stuff they call the bad stuff, but that's really where the issue is. And then we get insulin resistance. So, if you get people leaner in the abdomen and get them eating a slightly higher quality diet, you tend to improve all of it. Blood pressure, blood glucose, and the dyslipidemia, the HDL, the triglycerides, and overall insulin sensitivity.
That makes sense. So if somebody is obese or overweight, what's a good percentage? I mean, people always talk about, wanting to love the size they are, and
Yeah.
no body shame or anything. But if you're obese and you're having these markers that obviously that you're not healthy, right? What's a good percentage of weight that they should look for right away? Is it like 5-10%, and you start
Yeah.
seeing big differences?
Yeah, the clinical changes happen around that 5 to 10% of weight loss. It's not much because everybody's like, well, is the visceral fat hard to lose? It tends to be. That's what you lose in the beginning. So that's why a 5 to 10% weight loss, even if you're if you're 300 pounds and you have blood pressure issues, you have your blood sugar is a little bit high and your HDL is a little bit low, your triglycerides are high. So 15 to 30 pounds, and if you keep that off, that would probably resolve most of that, or at least mitigate it a bit. So you don't have to go from 300 to 200 pounds. You go to 270,
Yeah.
and all of a sudden it's like you see all these improvements, and that's because you lose a lot of that visceral fat, the stuff that's around your organs that you can't necessarily pinch in that early phase.
That's interesting, because a lot of people who get to be, 200-300 pounds plus, I think they automatically think that they need to get to skinny, right? Or
Yeah.
just lose a bunch of weight as fast as possible. And he's like, I think, back when Biggest Loser started, that's when we first started seeing all of that and people dropping all this weight so fast, and then it went back on. Now,
Yeah.
is there when people lose weight, 100, 200 pounds, something like that, is it much harder for them to keep that weight off? What has happened on a hormonal level and a metabolic rate? It just drops so much down. I've seen numbers where people need to work out twice as long to keep that off. Is that complete fallacy, or is there truth behind that?
Yeah, there's what's called that metabolic adaptation. So no matter what, when you lose weight, your metabolic rate goes down. The question is, does it go down further than what we expect? And that's kind of what the term metabolic adaptations.
Mm-hmm.
And in those Biggest Losers, these were extreme cases where they're basically starving themselves and doing excessive hours of cardio just to win a contest, as opposed to, I have patients that have lost 100 to 200 pounds who did it through lifestyle, not necessarily. I've had some who did it through bariatric surgery and medicines and whatever, but without those. And they did it relatively reasonably, but over the course of a year or two. Whereas these Biggest Losers, it's, I don't know what it is, 6 months.
It was a few months, and I think if you lasted longer, I mean, the last season was, I don't even know if it had that many people watching it, but I checked it out. I know a producer on the show, but yeah, it was a few months where they were dropping 60, 100 pounds, and then they came back and I lost even more weight. But it was really interesting what happens afterwards.
Yeah, so you look at their metabolic rates, and this is what, my buddy at NIH, he and his team looked at what happened to these people, and their metabolic rates dropped. Their basal metabolic rates dropped a lot. And so they had a lot of metabolic adaptation. But in a normal population, you don't see that level of metabolic adaptation. You do see somewhere between 0 to maybe 10, 15%, which means that let's say if you're burning 2,000 calories, or you should be burning 2,000 calories after you lose X amount of weight,
right,
that means you might be burning, around 1,800 calories at baseline. So it went down by about 10% than what we'd expect, somewhere around there. So, you don't need to drop weight like the people in the Biggest Loser. In fact, we don't recommend that. There are studies that show maybe faster weight loss gives more success in the beginning, and it's all relative too. It's, instead of losing weight at a rate of 0.5% of your weight per week. So if you're 400 pounds and you lose it at 2 pounds a week, you lose it at more like 1.5%. So 4 to 6 pounds a week in the beginning. Again, this is someone that's 400 pounds.
Sure.
And then it's of course, as you lose weight, it starts to slow down. But I don't really worry about the metabolic adaptation so much. I worry about overall consistency and sticking to the lifestyle that we know is going to help them keep the weight off. So I just did a video on the factors of long-term weight loss, which a lot of it is, you got to find some sort of diet the appetite is the biggest driver. Don't worry about the metabolic rate drops. Yeah. Appetite's the most important to take care of. And then also the decreases in spontaneous movement and whatever, your energy kind of goes down. So forcing yourself to really figure out a way to stay active. And then if you can do it over the long term, really increasing your physical activity, and then you can ramp up your intake. So you don't have to be on a 1200 calorie or 1500 calorie or whatever diet forever. You really ramp up your calories so you can fuel your performance, type of thing. But that's really, it's kind of a privilege if you're able to do that. Like, again, if you're working full time, you got kids, it's hard to get that hour of really moderate activity a day. So you do the best you can.
Yeah. And I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. What is the recommended activity for someone if they're just starting right now and they're listening to this podcast, and you're the obesity specialist here?
Yeah.
And a lot of people say, I played high school football 30 years ago. Well, that's great. You can't do the same thing that you did. You've got a lot of mileage on your body right now. So what would your recommendations be for those people? And anybody, check out Dr. Spencer's YouTube. He likes SpongeBob. He's on there too. What would your recommendations for people to be to start? Like, if it's been so long, or maybe their first time trying to lose weight?
Yeah, a lot of times I get people on the treadmill, or it doesn't have to be on the treadmill. If they can walk around the park or somewhere around there, start with like 10, 15 minutes and just keep increasing it from there. And then if possible, I don't tell people to go out and start running. That's probably a recipe for disaster if you have a lot of weight to lose. And again, cardio or exercise is a distant second to diet. So I start people walking, and then I really want to get them in the weight room if at all possible. Some people are just like, I'm not ready for that. So we get them walking, we get them losing weight through diet, and all of a sudden they're like, you know what? I'm ready. I want to get a day or two, a week of resistance training. And then we usually do like a full body, very like 1 to 2 sets, relatively lightweight, so they're not too super sore and they don't hate it. And then we progress from there. And eventually, ideal situation, 3 to 4 days a week of resistance training where they really get into it. They're doing maybe some sort of high intensity interval training, and then low intensity cardio. But like, that's way down the line where they can handle. And even then, you might not even get to that point. They may just not want to do that, and you just want to lift weights. Some people hate lifting weights, but they'll do it a day or two a week. So start them walking, progress from there, I think.
So, I mean, that makes a ton of sense. I think people, especially in the personal trainer world, they'll see somebody coming in that's 300 pounds, and then they try to beat the crap out of them and show them how out of shape they are. Well, if you've got that person doing one body weight squat, that person weighs 300 pounds.
Yeah.
Now compound that by 10 squats, volume wise, they just did 3,000 pounds. It's take a little bit of the weight away, but we're ease of math here. And then they're sore for a week, literally, because they can't walk, and then they get discouraged. Yes. So I think that's really sound advice. What about rest, recovery, supplementation? Everybody's like, what pill can I pop? And I know you're big on this. Like, people, you dump apple cider vinegar all over yourself, which I saw that video. That's pretty good. But what can people do, and what are the things that you see people doing you wish you I would just wish you would stop doing that?
Yeah. I mean, literally, you should see my DMs, but even in person, when I see people that are looking, they go, what supplement should I take? I'm like, if I could tell you this, just get the supplement thing out of your mind. They're not going to do anything. I'm doing a peer review on articles and chapters and textbooks, and they mention supplements like taking this and that. It's like these fit teas and whatever. I have them all. I have all my props because I do all these videos.
Yeah.
The amount of weight loss that they may help with is so minuscule and so small that it's not even worth even thinking about. The fact that you even have that in your mind is probably a red flag. In fact, people, I was just doing a video on how people that actually use these supplements tend to do worse. And it's not because they cause weight gain. It's because they have this quick fix mindset, unfortunately. So my goal is to get that mindset, just like forget about the supplements. They will not do anything. The sooner you forget about these stupid supplements, the sooner you're going to be on your path to success. And I understand, when I was young, I wanted to gain a ton of muscle. So I was looking for any edge. I was looking at these stupid myostatin inhibiting protein powders that were just all marketing. But I was like,
Sure.
whatever, I want to gain muscle. So I understand, although maybe it was a placebo for me, because every time I'd even work harder in the gym and eat more with it. So if somehow these help you, like just ramp up your activity or your efforts, fine. But most of the time what I see is that they just want something that will do the work for them. So if you understand that you have to work hard, like there is no getting around it. There's absolutely no getting around it. The sooner you accept that, the sooner you're going to be successful. The sooner you understand it's all about the consistency around working hard and preparing and setting your environment up for success, the sooner you're going to be successful. Like, just forget about the freaking supplements. But that's the one I see all the time. It drives me insane.
Yeah, I get that. And I see all these like teas and all sorts of different stuff. And there might be a time and place, but you talked about it. Like if you're just trying to lose weight and you've got a lot of weight to lose, and if you're getting on stage and you've got those minuscule things and maybe those little itty bitty things,
maybe the little edge,
might do something. And professional bodybuilders are juiced up like no other, so like they still need to work hard. They need to put in the work. They're incredible athletes, but they do. That's when the point where all of that is coming together. So you need to spend thousands of dollars on this stuff. Like, I think most people, they take a multivitamin, maybe a fish oil or some D or something. If you're not getting the sun, you're probably okay.
Yeah.
Like, you want to get nutty with it. You want to get some blood work done to see if you have expensive pee, like all the stuff you're taking. Maybe that's an option for you. But supplementation, huge. Now, where have you gotten things wrong in your career? Have you ever been like, I got that wrong, I was completely just missed that?
So early in my career, I was kind of indoctrinated by the low carb doctors, famous ones. They've written books with the Atkins and all these people, these guys that are pretty prolific in that world. And it made sense, the whole lipid storage, insulin, carbohydrate hypothesis. And it really wasn't until so in medical school, you're kind of drinking from a fire hose. You don't have time to search the literature at the same time of just learning the foundations of pathology, physiology, and all that type of stuff. So you listen to your elderly doctors and you take their advice as gospel. That you're supposed to learn from them. So it wasn't necessarily, not that I got it wrong, but it was more like I had to go on my own journey to kind of figure it out. Now I still like a low carbohydrate diet for a lot of people, because it just means eating protein and vegetables, which I think, is probably a good thing when it's coming to losing weight. But you can still eat carbohydrates and lose weight. You can eat higher fat and lose weight too, but it does come down to the energy balance, the calories in, calories out, and maybe one helps you with satiety more than the other. That was probably an issue before, but that was early on in my career. I think through the years, I've kind of figured out more coaching methods. There was a point where I feel like I had too much empathy.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a weird thing, but it drains you from a caretaker / clinician coach standpoint. If you have too much empathy, you burn out. So you feel too much. So I think I had that for too much. And so I might have gone a little bit the other way, but that's about it, I'd say.
Yeah. I know my wife was, she got her master's in science and she was pre-med for, her undergrad. And she's like, I don't know if I can do this because I can't. She's like, she's like empathetic with people. And then she's like, I just know it would affect me way too much, to get bad news all the time. So I have a lot of respect for doctors, especially ones that are able to put themselves in people's shoes. Some just get like completely just zoned out. And I see, like, for your own mental health, you may need to do that.
Yeah.
Here's a question I get a lot. What about like polyunsaturated fatty acids? What's your thought on that, and vegetable oils? And a lot of people demonizing them, like I'd rather have a pile of sugar versus that. What do you think on that?
Yeah, you see these gurus online and they just make things up. It's just because they want to be different, they want to be contrarian, they want to go against the American Heart Association. And the thing is, like, they pull out some truths, but then cherry pick what they want to fit their biases. It's really weird. So the truth is that, yeah, saturated fat and polyunsaturated fat and monounsaturated fat, they're actually different types of fatty acids within these umbrella terms. It's all based on the biochemistry of the chains of the carbons and whether they have double bonds or not. But saturated fat, everyone's like, oh, saturated fat clogs your arteries. Well, no, it's more that certain saturated fatty acids, depending on the food that it comes packaged in, may increase your LDL cholesterol, the stuff that we feel is the biggest risk factor when it comes to lipids for increasing atherosclerosis. So if you look at, like, butter has a lot of palmitic acid, and that's one of these longer chain saturated fatty acids that tends to have this increase in LDL cholesterol. Now, if you look at if you look at yogurt, whole fat yogurt has the same amount of palmitic acid, doesn't have the same effect. So it also depends on what food is packaged in.
Yeah.
And then you compare it to, like, let's say, walnuts, which have a lot of omega-3 and 6 polyunsaturated fatty acids. It also has some fiber in it as well. If you swapped out that butter for walnuts in what we call like a eucaloric way, meaning the same amount of calories of butter for walnuts, you will actually drop your LDL cholesterol. So what these people are going to say, though, is the polyunsaturated fats are bad for you, and it's because they actually increase inflammation, and they cherry pick a lot of things. The truth is, if you're getting most of your foods from whole, unprocessed foods, and you're getting what they're packaged in, when you get nuts and fish, they actually come packaged with certain antioxidant and vitamin type of nutrients. You actually decrease the oxidation of these fatty acids, and overall we see a pattern that looks to be an improvement of health. So it's just, a lot of these people they want to be different to be different. No, I don't think you should drink corn oil or whatever, which is what they basically go, we should just put corn oil on everything. No, there could be an increased risk of oxidizing these fatty acids if you're cooking with corn oil, but people shouldn't be doing that anyway.
Right.
Anyway, so you take a little bit of truth, you spin it, whatever. Like I said, the truth is really, focus on nuts, seeds, fish, and whole types of foods. Don't drink butter. Probably don't drink corn oil either.
Right.
Eat a healthier, kind of more plant-based type of style. Again, that's a whole other thing, because you could get into what's plant-based and whatever. But that's kind of my stance there.
Okay, so eat whole food for the most part. Eat some vegetables, probably have some fruit. Eat lean protein if that's your thing. We're not going to go get in that carnivore and plant paradox and all that sort of stuff. And that's a whole rabbit hole.
Yeah.
All right, last question. I'll let you go, as I know you want to get that nice pump. So where do you think the future of medicine in obesity, weight loss is heading?
Yeah, we're seeing really cool medicines out there. So, again, from a population standpoint, I don't know what we're going to do to improve the environment, but I do know from an individual treatment standpoint, we're seeing very cool pharmacological treatments that eventually, once you put them all together, they're probably going to be as good as bariatric surgery. Again, you have to take this for the rest of your life? Maybe.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, because of those feedback mechanisms, for some, not everyone, there will be a lot of successful individuals without using medicine. Not a lot, but a good percentage. But for those that just can't do it due to hunger, we see these medicines that just cut out hunger and appetite. We're getting back. We see some right now, but these ones they're so powerful that they're just going to basically shut off those signals and make you feel normal. That's what patients feel when they're like, wow, I didn't have to go for seconds or thirds. Even though like they always try to not go for a second. When you're like, only eat one portion of this, they're like, I couldn't help myself. I couldn't stop eating. And you may say, though, that's, laziness or whatever. It's like, there may be some psychology involved there, but it's a physiologic drive is a lot of it too. You give them a medicine and they're like, I ate one portion and I felt normal. Like I was done. That was good. And so that's what these medicines, they're not like fat burners. They just work centrally in the brain to shut off certain patterns of appetite. And so that's the future. And I mean, we're seeing it. We're seeing all sorts of cool stuff. I go to the conferences every year, maybe not this year because of COVID, but
Sure.
every year I see the brand new studies that they just released and they do it at these conferences. And it's always interesting. It's like, wow. And then once they eventually get released, I do use the medicines in my patients. And it's pretty cool to see if they struggle. Again, I don't just give the medicines out to everybody, but like struggling, okay, let's try medicine. And not everybody responds either. Some people do have a more psychological component where you could give them bariatric surgery and pump them full of all sorts of medicines and they'll eat through it because it wasn't physiologic. But for the patients where it's physiological, it's like a miracle.
Wow. Well, Doc, I appreciate your time. I know you're gonna get that workout in.
A sick pump.
Get that sick pump, that sarcoplasmic pump. High reps or low reps? What are you going today? Medium reps? Volume?
I usually go, well, not usually, but it's high reps, 10 to 20.
Okay. All right, cool. You guys can add muscle tissue, whatever rep range you're in.
Yeah.
Check out Dr. Nadolsky online. So your Instagram, Dr. Nadolsky, Twitter, you've got, what do you got? TikTok? You're everywhere. YouTube?
YouTube is the new one. So if you want to check that out, just, type in Dr. Spencer Nadolsky and you'll find
you popped up right away. I checked out your SpongeBob video.
Nice. Perfect.
All right, Doc. Appreciate it. Thanks for coming on the Fatter Future podcast. I'm Joey Thurman. To your health. And don't be a fatty, FADDY. See, you got that. Be a part of the future. Cheers.
Thanks, Doc, for coming on this episode. And next week, if you're in the health and fitness industry and you haven't heard of this man, I don't know where you've been hiding, what books you haven't been reading, because Paul Chek of the Chek Institute is absolutely legendary. He's spawned the careers of many top health and fitness experts worldwide with his Chek Institute. He speaks all over the world, world-renowned, world. Can I say that enough? Paul Chek. Legendary man next week. I can't even have enough time to tell you how much we talk about fitness, nutrition, how much information is in his head, or actually is it in his head, next week on the Fatter Future podcast. And make sure to go to Himalaya.com/diet to check out my diet crash course. You can listen to the first episode for free and use code DIET for 2 weeks for free. You don't want to miss that. Make sure to subscribe and review this podcast. Tell your friends at Fatter Future Podcast on Instagram. The Fatter Future Podcast is available everywhere you listen to podcasts. And make sure you follow me on all social media channels and troll away at Joey Thurman Fit. Take care and don't be a fatty.